Good
evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening, Barbados. This afternoon, Prime Minister, the Honorable Mia Amor Mottley, and members of her cabinet.
This evening, we want to do another update for you. This is very much a process, and therefore it is a work in progress as well. Because of the state of play, and we are less than 36 hours from the passage of Hurricane Elsa, it means that we are still very much in the data gathering and visitation stages. And therefore, what you hear from us this evening represents progress from yesterday in terms of the information that we have. But as we learned firsthand today, when I was in the parish of St. Philip today, access to telecoms was spotty at best. And therefore, as we moved around too in Christchurch and St. Philip last night and today, there are persons who are still calling in. They don't have access to the contacts or whatever, so we expect that much of the updates that we're giving you will continue to change and move pretty much as we go forward. The reality is that we are first and foremost lucky as a nation. It could have been far worse, but it was bad enough, and certainly one of the more challenging events that we've had to deal with in recent times with respect to climate. Barbados' last hurricane that really affected us as a hurricane would have been obviously Hurricane Janet. Thomas stood as a significantly destructive tropical storm, and Elsa is clearly up in there between Thomas and Janet as one of those events that has literally brought dislocation, anxiety, horror to too many Barbadians over the course of the last 36 hours. I've seen firsthand a lot of the pain. I've seen firsthand the fact that in many instances, yes, that the quality of construction has to be dealt with frontally. I've seen firsthand the fact that many people have lost everything, not just furniture, not just appliances, their clothes, their personal items, but they are grateful to be alive. Indeed, when we looked at many of the houses that had fallen flat, one would have to say that we really, as a people, have to give thanks that there is still no reported evidence of anyone losing their lives and no reported evidence of any major injuries that has been shared with the Department of Emergency Management or any of the ministries. And for that, we really have to say thank you and to give thanks not just today, but tomorrow is Sunday, and I know as a nation that we know how to do so collectively and individually. At this point, because we want to get on to the business, because we are conscious that everybody is busy cleaning up and everybody is busy doing what they have to do. In the circumstances, I'm going to pass first and foremost to the Minister of Home Affairs, and who is in charge of the Department of Emergency Management, and I believe that we also have his director here, who is behind us. We're seeing more footage behind us of some of the damage, and I'd really like to thank those persons who have put it together so that the country can get an idea of some of what we're facing. And believe you me, this is just a snapshot. I'd pass over to Minister Abrams, who will speak first, and then he will invite the director at the appropriate time. She's the only one who will join by Zoom, and I think you will appreciate why. We needed her to remain on site in order to be able to collate. And I want to thank all of the members of the Department of Emergency Management, all of the public officials, because most persons don't realize that they have to fall in from a certain 12 hours or so minimum before the event, and therefore they have been working non-stop. In many instances, some have not even gone home, and we really have to give thanks for their commitment to task and job at this point. Minister?
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. Unfortunately, Barbados over the last couple of days has gotten accustomed to associating my face with bad news. We underwent a very significant weather event over the last couple of days, and the passage of Hurricane Elsa has left a trail of damage and destruction in Barbados. The country has come to a halt, as one can well imagine. A lot of the critical facilities have been impacted in some way or the other. Barbados would know by now that we've had issues with our telecoms and people's connectivity. A lot of Barbados is without electricity. A lot of Barbados is still without water, and we've had tremendous damage to our housing stock. There are a lot of families that have been displaced over the last couple of days. It was indeed a heart-wrenching experience to be in the command center over the last 2 days and to be getting the calls coming in, people crying as their houses are being destroyed around them during the hurricane. The Prime Minister spoke very briefly about the impact of the hurricane and the fact that nobody was injured. But behind us, they were just showing a video, and you will see a lot of pictures on social media as the actual devastation that happened on the tour with the Prime Minister over the last 2 days. We have seen houses that were pretty much flattened. The roofs were ripped off, furniture got blown outside, all while people were sheltering inside the same houses. The fact that nobody was seriously injured and no one lost their life, considering what we actually saw on the ground, is simply amazing, and we have to thank God for that one. At this point in time, PM, I'll just turn over to the director because she has the stats on the impact of it, so Barbados can get a full appreciation of how many people were actually impacted and what the damage looked like across Barbados. This is the moving target. We are at present still compiling while we were on the ground with the PM. We passed through a number of districts where people had not yet made their reports because they had no connectivity. They had no telephone access and they had no internet access, and that is how we've been getting the majority of the reports in. So the numbers that Kerry is going to give you are numbers that we have as of now entered into the system. Some are still being entered, and there are people who, as connection is restored across the country, are now getting a chance to make their report. So we expect that these numbers will rise. But she will just give you a snapshot as to where we are right now. And before I turn over to Kerry, I just want to thank you and the team in the command center that went over and beyond. I just want to congratulate you on how this whole affair was handled and the fact that we were in a much better position to deal with what happened than we would have been over the last couple of years. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Kerry. Thank you.
Good afternoon, PM. Good afternoon, Minister. Good afternoon, Barbados. And thanks very much for those words. As of 5 this afternoon, the total number of damages reported was 1,178. Of those, we had 2 instances of flooding, water damage, 7, roads impassable, 13 instances of electricity outage, 15 roof leaks, 15 fallen poles or wires, 60 house collapse. We had a total of 62 fallen trees, 85 house damage, 89 roof damage, 743, and there was also another few which looked at some other types of damage which totaled 87. So from those statistics, you would know that roof damage was the most regular occurrence. There were 743 instances of those. And as Minister and Prime Minister would have indicated, this is a work in progress. We are currently, as we speak, updating the database. It is important to note as well the house collapse unfortunately add up to 62. We have also looked at the information as it related to by parish, and based on our statistics to date, we note that the parishes, the St. Michael area, as well as Christchurch, St. George, and St. Philip, seem to, the damages there are very high, and account for most of the overall damage reports. As you would have noted, the National Emergency Operations Center has been stood up since Thursday evening, and we are continuously fielding calls and working on resolutions to what is happening on the ground in Barbados.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hines. If I can just perhaps contextualize it, the different categories for houses come up together to 981, 62 house collapses, 89 house repairs, 743 roof damage, and 87 with other concerns. Suffice it to say that I will ask DEM to provide you, or the others to provide you with the summary, and you will get the summary by parish too, because, and I want to thank the others, including my Director of Communications, who developed an app yesterday to allow us to be able to handle the information more expeditiously and in a way that will make sense for all of the public officers, but also for the media. At this stage, I'd like to invite the Minister Godinegel and the various other persons who will speak with him to address the issues of utilities, with the exception of telecoms, because I don't think the persons are here for that yet. Both are here? Well, we'll wait for both for that. I'm not picking sides. And secondly, he will also address the issue of the roads and the arterial access. Minister Godinegel, please.
Thank you, Prime Minister.
I'd ask the others, as he talks to, if we can keep a picture-in-picture at least of some of the roof damage and the other damage across the country, because we know that Barbadians are anxious to learn, but by the same token, I don't want people getting injured going and looking for themselves. So we can help you see what you can see. Thank you.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Good afternoon. As we are all aware, we are experiencing some challenges with our utilities. This afternoon, we've asked the Barbados Light and Power to give us an update, as well as the Barbados Water Authority to provide us an update in respect of the water supply and also the restoration of electricity across the island. Therefore, I asked Mr. Roger Blackman of the Barbados Light and Power Company to give us an update on the status of the restoration of power.
Thank you, Minister. Good afternoon, Prime Minister, ministers, colleagues. So, as of 4 p.m. this afternoon, we've safely restored supply to about 65% of customers on the island. We did experience quite a lot of damage, as we would have shared in our previous media briefings, from Hurricane Elsa. Our initial damage assessment indicates approximately 200 poles will need to be replaced, 45 transformers, and around 1 kilometer of wires to be restrung. That, of course, is an initial assessment, as some of the others have mentioned. We're still doing assessments in the field as we go out there and make repairs. We're tracing lines and circuits, and as more information comes in, we'll be able to give even better estimates going forward. At this point, we're aiming to have at least 80% of our customers back within 48 hours. And the focus continues to be on those areas that are considered emergencies or critical, safety being a key factor. And after that, we're focusing or paying a lot of attention to big clusters. And once those are in place, then working our way towards the smaller feeders, smaller clusters of customers. We have had examples where, or received calls where a customer may say, well, my street is off, but I'm seeing the streets on either side or the block across the road on. An example would be like Dover Terrace. Yesterday, I was having a conversation a little earlier with someone here. And the issue in those instances is that we are looking at restoring a feeder, so closing a breaker and supplying a big area. But within that area, there may be small arteries that feed off of the main lines where a branch may have come across a line and tore it off, or a fuse may have blown. And so even as we restore, there are those small pockets that we may not get to immediately, because we're using those resources as efficiently as possible to get as many people on as quickly as we can. So while a big area may come on and there are small pockets and you may see your neighbors on, it isn't because we've forgotten you, it's just we're deploying the resources as efficiently as we can to get as many people on as quickly as we can. So I wanted to share that because we are getting quite a few calls like that. The type of damage that we're seeing is similar, or in some instances worse than we would have seen for Tropical Storm Tomas. Of course, this was a Category 1 hurricane as it passed over us, and so that isn't surprising. And during Tomas, we did get about 90% of our customers back within the first week, and then it took us a week or a little more than that to finalize and get everyone back on. So I say that just to say those are the sort of timelines that we've seen in the past for similar events. Our crews are out there today. You'll see them in the field, and we are encouraging customers to continue to call in. We're collecting all the information, and we're using that in the control center to dispatch our crews as efficiently as we can. There is an app that we've created called ECI Restore. You can download that from either the Apple Store or the Google Store. And what that allows, we use it internally for our own damage assessment, but it allows customers as well to enter information. There's drop-downs. It's very easy to use, and that allows us, again, to get a very good picture of what is required out there and to respond efficiently. So, again, we apologize for the inconvenience, and we ask that you be patient with us as we work to restore power to those that are still affected as quickly as possible. And on that note, I think I'll pause and hand it back over to the Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Blackman. At this time, I would like to invite Mr. Keith Roy Halliday, General Manager of the Barbados Water Authority, to provide us with an update in respect of the water situation. Mr. Halliday.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Prime Minister, ministers, invited guests and media, and those who are listening at home. I first want to say thank you on behalf of the Barbados Water Authority. We have found that the last 2 days have been not as difficult as we would have expected, simply because everyone has been cooperating with us. We would have come out early to everyone through the media and indicated that we would not immediately be able to address outages, but to give us some time to be able to get back to you once we have had our systems replenished. We're still, in fact, engaged in that. In terms of our actual facilities and our ability to supply water, roughly 33% of our facilities are currently in place, but production capacity is at 86%. That means that we can supply 86% of our population with water. But I need to hedge that in the sense that while we can supply that amount of water from a production standpoint, There's still challenges in the distribution systems in various areas that we still have to work through and correct. As well, to get our facilities fully up and line, that process will still take another several hours and possibly 2 or 3 days. And this is really a function of the distribution system, of our ability rather to see the distribution system quickly replenishing. Demand for water is what will drive that, and given the deficits or lack of water we would have had in the last while since shutdown, the demand is usually very steep immediately following such events as these, as the one that we've encountered, or similar events to the ones that we've encountered, and therefore will continue to ask us to be patient with us. In respect of our tanker fleet, we have them out in numbers. We have about 15 tankers. We have 15 tankers out today. And I need to speak to that a bit, given the expectations that have been out there and the comments that we've seen on Facebook. Previously, we had about 12 tankers in our fleet, of which only 7 or 8 were operable in any given day. We have since increased that to an operation to being 15, which means in any given day we can have 15 available. We have a number of other tankers that are quickly coming on stream. Even today and tomorrow, we're working to make sure that those are the appliances that are attached to them, the piping that is attached to them, becomes operable so that over the next several days to week, we can have much more tankers deployed. I needed to explain that because we've had a number of questions raised as to why tankers are coming in and they're not yet on the road. And there's a process that they have to go through, not only in terms of being serviced or being made suitable or to be able to service our customers, but also in terms of the different types of additions and adjustments we have to make to them. So we appreciate your understanding as well where that is concerned. The community tanks are all fully topped up and available. We will continue to service them as we've been doing today throughout the night. We have 170 community tanks in the various areas, particularly in those areas that have been hit with drought, such as the North, St. Peter, St. Lucie, St. Joseph, St. Andrew, St. John, and in some instances, St. Thomas and St. George. Those tankers are being serviced by our tanker fleet as well, and therefore there's a careful balance that we make. In terms of the replenishment of our systems, we do know that there will be several challenges that we need you to be aware of. As the water is replenished, as the distribution system is recharged, we may get additional breaks and bursts, and we need to prepare everyone for that. And this is simply a reality of the age network that we have. We're currently dealing with a few main bursts. One is a Prout, an 8-inch burst. We have a couple of larger sizes that are out there as well. Excuse me, as well. And that is why the current demand for water in several areas, such as the parishes of St. James, St. Thomas, and St. George, have been as high in the last 8 hours to 12 hours than they would have originally been. We have little reports in the parishes of St. Michael and Christchurch, hardly any in St. Philip, and we're dealing with the usual areas that will normally have water area deficits, such as the North and St. Joseph and St. John, but we are making headway. By the end of tomorrow, we believe that most of the significant bursts will be out of the way, would have been repaired, but we are also ready to face the fact that we may have additional ones coming online. We will continue to keep you appraised by our public service announcement in that respect as well. Okay. The last point I would make is that for voice calls, for any reports that you may care to make, please call us at 434-4292, 434-4292. And we have opened 2 cell phones for WhatsApp, only for WhatsApp text, videos or pictures, 836-4655, 836-4655, or 836-4683. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Halliday. I wish to go into some additional details and to advise Barbadians that notwithstanding that we have increased our pumping capacity to 86%, the distribution system is only at about 52%. It will therefore take the Barbados Water Authority I would think maybe between 3 to 5 days to get the system back up to full or optimum capacity. We were advised about 3 to 4 hours ago that the ionic system, which went down, is now back to full production, and therefore the challenges that we're experiencing in parts of West Coast, going down to Trent, going back to St. Thomas, that some of those issues, and parts of St. Joseph, that some of those issues will be brought on, that is, water supply challenges will be brought under control. The other issue that I would like to expand on has to do with our move to purchase additional water tankers for the very strategic distribution of water during times like these. What has happened is that the Barbados Water Authority, even though they took possession of the tankers, there's a process which we have to go through in terms of the sanitization of the vehicles, and that process is ongoing, and therefore we are deploying those water tankers as they complete the desanitization process. I would also advise you that we have given the mandate to the Barbados Water Authority to expand, since we received the all clear, to expand the times for the distribution of water to communities in Barbados, because we're well aware, and we do apologize and empathize with those who are experiencing water shortages, that we are going to deploy those water tankers across the, not only during the day, but also at night, to ensure that Barbadians have water, and that is being done by the Barbados Water Authority. So I just thought I would put that into some context in respect of what we're doing. Yes, it is challenging, it continues to be challenging, but the men and women at the Barbados Water Authority are working around the clock to ensure that we get the optimum transmission of water to all Barbadians. At this time, we also have the other members of the utility grouping, comprising the telecommunication companies. I would therefore ask Ms. Marlene Seeley of Flow to give us a brief update in respect of what's happening, and also after Ms. Seeley, we'll ask Mr. Rommel Sargent to provide us with an update on behalf of Digicel. Ms. Seeley.
Good evening, everyone. So I'm pleased to say that for this Hurricane Elsa was a major test for our telecoms infrastructure, and I'm happy to say that we were able to keep our infrastructure sustained throughout and keep our network up throughout the course of the passage of Hurricane Elsa. As you can imagine, a lot of our customers would have turned to their mobile phones to touch base with their family, their friends, and of course we saw, as a result, a significant spike in mobile traffic. As I said, people were checking in on their families and their relatives. Just to bring you up to date, we also, during the course of the hurricane, we would have provided our prepaid customers with free 1 gigabyte free data and 100 voice minutes, and that would have been on Friday, and that was followed then with a special offer for extra data and minutes if you had done a $15 top-up. So certainly our prepaid customers were very happy with that, so they were able to stay in contact with their relatives and friends. But just to bring you up to date on where we are now, so our fixed network is stable. However, 39 cell sites are off air, mainly across St. George, St. Philip, and the Lower Bridgetown area, largely due to power outages. As you know, our mobile sites are powered by electricity, so as a result of the power outages, they have gone down. In some instances, our generators are now currently working to keep some of our sites up. We're in the process, of course, of collating reports of downed lines and fallen cables, and our team continue to carry out a damage assessment, obviously after the all clear was given, and this has continued. We only have 4 of our own poles that are down, and the majority are due, of course, to trees falling on them and on the cable, and because of the electric company poles as well, snapping. Our technicians are merely conducting assessments, drive-throughs in allocated areas to report any drops, cables that are down, and making safe any issues that they find throughout the network. But for the most part, we're happy to say, as I said, we have Cable and Wireless would not have experienced this in Barbados before. In some of our other markets, a Category 1 hurricane, pretty major for Barbados, and for the most part, our network stood the test, and we are really happy with that as we continue now to do the necessary repairs to the down cables and aspects of our network. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Mr. Sergeant.
Good evening, Prime Minister. Good evening, Ministers. Good evening, everyone. All right, so I'm here to report on Digicel's challenges throughout this situation that we're facing right now. We have a total of 98 sites, and out of those 98 sites, we have 20 currently offline. The areas that are impacted, parish, I'll call them by parish first, Christchurch, St. Andrew, St. George, St. James, St. John, St. Joseph, St. Lucy, St. Michael, St. Peter, St. Philip, St. Thomas. All right? But in those areas, people in this close area of Spikestown, Pie Corner, Belle Plaine, Boarded Hall, Mullins, Black Bess, Holetown, South District, 6 Roads, and in the Marleyvale area and surrounding areas. We also have in our home and entertainment areas, majority of them are off obviously due to power, but if you have power in the area and the service is still offline, I would ask you to contact us via WhatsApp at 826-5372. If you have any reported areas that are still offline, or should I say impacted despite your power is back up, please contact us via WhatsApp at 826-5372. Again, we would like to apologize for the inconvenience. This was a first for us as well, but we're trying our utmost best to get the service restored to you as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It is also necessary that we give Barbadians an update as to what is happening with our roadways. MTW workers from across all 13 depots were deployed today and will continue tomorrow to assist with the cleanup of our highways and all major road arteries across the island. The workers are they're working long hours, but at the same time, they are assisting with the clearing of debris on all of our roadways. And we anticipate that this exercise will continue for a couple of days. The ministry also issued additional chainsaws to the Barbados Defense Force and also to all 13 depots across the island. Again, this was a strategic move on the part of our planning in the ministry to ensure that we plan for any, unfortunately, disasters as we're faced with as we continue with our cleanup exercise all over Barbados. So we have issued additional chainsaws, like I said, to the Barbados Defense Force and to the depots across the island. The ash workers, as we refer to them, they were also deployed today, and they will continue to be deployed as an ongoing exercise as part of the cleanup effort across the island. It is important, therefore, that we remove all the debris especially leaves that will go into our drains, box drains, and our culverts that could cause us additional flooding challenges as we go through this season in the event that we have additional heavy rains and or any other storm-like activities. So they're ongoing. But what I would like to do is to ask the Chief Technical Officer to provide us with an additional update in respect of what's happening with the cleanup across the island. Like I said, we are focusing on the highways, all major arteries, and the ash workers are also going into the communities as they have done in the past to assist us with the cleanup. But the Chief Technical Officer will give us a more in-depth analysis of the works undertaken. Mrs. Charbonnes.
Thank you, Minister, and good evening, good afternoon, everyone. Just quickly, Minister did give you a very good overview of what we have done. Typically, what we do at the ministry is that we have a skeletal network of roads that we consider to be the main roads that we start with first. So these are major highways, ABC, Mighty Guina Highway, highways 1 through 7. And we also work in association with the roving teams. We get very good assistance from them, as well as the Barbados Defence Force, and of course the Sanitation Service Authority. Because after we chop the trees up, and sometimes you can't take it away, cart away right away, so we put it at the edge of the roadside to be collected later. I want to make it clear as well that sometimes the trees are, it's not possible for us to deal with the entire roadway, to clear the entire roadway, so what we try to do is make the roadway passable. So I want to urge the traveling public that as you move around in the next few days, especially as it gets dark because everywhere still has not received electricity, please travel slowly and be cautious because there's still wires that are down, and our ministry staff are not trained to deal with trees if they've been entangled in the wires. So when you see it like that, that's why we've left it alone. We leave that to the experts at Light and Power to deal with. And I also want to mention that we also deal with the drainage situation. We were fortunate that last year we were able to get 50 gullies and quite a few of our water courses cleared with the help of our contractors. And we've also done quite a bit of work with our well contractors. So wells have been cleaned and they have been repaired. And I suspect that that is why we have not seen the great level of flooding that we would have seen if we had not done that. So we want to say thanks to everyone that has helped us reach this point, and thanks to God that no one has had any serious injury to person. All the damage that so far that we've received has been to property, and you can replace your property, but it's impossible to replace a human being. So I want to caution you again, as you move around Barbados, please travel cautiously because it's still a dangerous place, because there are still things left in the roadway. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Bennett-Innes. I would also like, following through on the point of the works being done by the Drainage Division, they continue to play a significant role in our flood mitigation efforts. Indeed, we've not experienced the significant amount of flooding that we would normally have experienced because the Drainage Department went into key critical areas that they had identified over time, and they had created what we refer to as detention and retention ponds and swales, which allowed the Drainage Department to reduce the flow from upstream going downstream. We've captured a significant amount of water which will go back into the aquifer to obviously help us with our reserves and the aquifer system. So that work will continue throughout this period. There's no stopping in terms of the well cleaning. We've added additional well contractors to assist us not only with the cleaning of wells, but also with the acquiring new and additional wells in areas where we've been experiencing flood in the low-lying areas. But when you look back to a couple of years ago and see what happened in Speightstown, Watton, and other areas, the works within the Drainage Department, they continue to pay significant dividends for Barbadians, and we would like to thank them for all that they do along with the staff at the ministry. But I would also like to remind Barbadians that as we continue this exercise, it is time consuming. There's a lot of wells that we have to clean across the island, and that we have to water courses that we have to clear and to maintain. So with that, I would like to continue to ask for your your patience as we continue to improve our flood mitigation efforts across Barbados. Thank you, Prime Minister.
Thank you very much, Ian, for that comprehensive briefing from the utility companies and from your own ministry. I want to add my 2 cents worth to this. And I've heard Mr. Blackman talk about 5 days. I've heard Mr. Holliday 3 to 5 days. I keep reminding the people of Barbados that I know what it is to have gone through hurricanes in most places. This is the first time I've ever experienced a hurricane in Barbados. But I've been through hurricanes in Jamaica, in London, in Miami, in New York. And the bottom line is that in every instance, the return of utilities and normal services is not a 3-day exercise or a 5-day exercise. And therefore, there will be pockets that will be without for some time. I want us to be patient. I want us to understand and appreciate the nature of the challenge. When you hear Mr. Blackman speak about transformers having to be replaced, 45, the first question as an island state that we must ask is, does he have all of the right parts on island? And if he doesn't, then to come into reality with the pandemic, which means that the disruption of the supply and logistics chain is likely to affect us there as well, even though, if you know me, and you know many of the people who work with me, we will move heaven and earth to try and get access to what we need. But the reality is Barbados is still an island surrounded by water. You understand? A landmass surrounded by water, therefore ergo island. Ergo somebody got to fly or somebody got to sail to get here, which means that while with the best will in the world, Mr. Blackman would like to tell us and assure us that the 45 transformers would be replaced within the 5 days. If there are difficulties with parts, then we're going to have an issue with delay. Similarly for the telecoms companies, similarly for the Barbados Water Authority. So I therefore have the responsibility of tempering expectations and urging patience and tolerance. But I do know this, that it is unlikely to be months, which has been the experience of many other Caribbean countries and some first world states in recovering from hurricanes and cyclones, and to that and floods. And to that extent, I therefore feel that we will still be ahead of the game, but it does require patience and tolerance. In my own personal circumstances, I had no electricity for most of yesterday and last night, got back late. Similarly, water, pressure low, I am in the same boat as you. And we know that all of us can get through this together, because this is not normal behavior. This is not a normal event. This is a hurricane that has hit us for the first time in 66 years. So please, with that, I'd like to invite Minister Duguid, please, to address the issue. You would have heard me speak to the fact that we need, in some manner, form, or fashion, to address 981 and rising housing issues that have different combinations and permutations, from complete destruction of 62 right back through. Minister.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. And I also have to add that, like you, I've also had no water, no electricity, and no access, because there was a tree blocking where I live, and 80 houses in that area had a tree blocking. And I want to thank the roving rapid response team, as well as MTW, for finally getting that tree cleared. And I'm told that Light and Power tells me it will take about 5 to 6 days to get the wires restrung, because it's quite a long length. So I think all of us have to recognize that it is a difficult time for the country, and we all have to be patient and recognize that people are working flat out 24 hours a day to restore as much of the services as possible. And we recognize that it's a difficult thing, and it is some territory that a lot of us have not worked in before, and that it will be a learning curve as well. With respect to the housing situation, you'd recognize that 700 I think was the last count, houses have had roof problems. And what we intend to do, firstly, I believe it's 48, within 48 hours, we're going to try to get as many of the houses that are total rebuilds started. And we're dividing that between the Urban Development Commission, the Rural Development Commission, and the National Housing Corporation. And there are certain geographic locations for the Urban Development Commission and Rural Development Commission, and we'll be following those. With respect to the National Housing Corporation, we'll be doing the houses that are wall and wood, masonry and carpentry together. And those obviously will need a little more engineering works, and those will be the ones that the National Housing Corporation will tend to. More importantly, Prime Minister, as well, when we rebuild these houses, we'll be very specific and focusing on using roof straps and strapping the house to the foundation as well. Because I think a lot of the houses that we are seeing problems with over this last problem, both with the freak storm and with the hurricane that has just passed, is a lot of houses did not have hurricane straps, or those that may have had some type of hurricane strap did not also have the strapping from the foundation onto the house itself. So we're also going to be embarking on a program and monitoring and assessing as we build rebuild these houses that they have the appropriate hurricane straps and hurricane structures. So essentially, those were the new builds. Also encouraging those people that if we give them the materials that they can get on with their friends and their family to be able to do their repairs themselves, to do that. And the National Housing Corporation will be the focal point for those people who just need materials only. As I was in the constituency of Christchurch West today, vast majority of people told me that once we provided the materials that they would be able to get on with the repairs only. Obviously, this is important because with 700, by the time we're finished, maybe 800, that we're encouraging people to do that. So between the total rebuilds and those that need materials only for minor repairs, we also have a major repair program. And again, the UDC, the RDC, and National Housing Corporation will also get involved to do the major repairs. But minor repairs and those that need materials only, those agencies and the National Housing Corporation. That is essentially what we'll be doing. It is a mammoth task. Please work with us, bear with us as we work through it. We're collecting as much as information as we can, getting as many of them assessed as possible, and we're going to hit the ground running to get as many done, together with those from this storm and the freak storm before. That's it.
Thank you for addressing that, because as you would recall, with the freak storm, I think we had about 167 houses
Correct.
that had reported damage.
There's some
overlap,
but not a lot,
but
so
not
it adds numbers.
completely. So when we take that along with the 981 reports, you're well over 1,000, probably over 1,100 actually, in terms of housing solutions in some manner, form, or fashion that are required, from minor repairs, as you heard William say, to major repairs, and therefore the combination, we are saying where people can do their own repairs among the list that is in DEM. This is, of course, after the Department of Emergency Management has done the assessment, the interview, and has certified that these houses are the ones that clearly need support. The collapse houses, the reason why we can move with that immediately is that a house collapses like cards on the ground. So you don't need any further assessment to know that that has gone completely, and it was there 2 days ago, it is not there now. So that is why we're moving with such alacrity. And may I remind the country that the laws of this land allow for emergency procurement in the event of an emergency, and urgency, and specialized services or equipment, and if it is urgent. There is no doubt that this is urgent because these people have nowhere, no shelter. There's no doubt that this happened in the first hurricane in 66 years, which is a crisis. So the ones, however, for repairs require actually a little more effort because you have to do the assessment. And those assessments depend not only on the geographical location to determine who takes the lead, but it also depends on the state of the repairs that has to be done. And to that extent, we will be moving and bustling over the course of the next few days. to make sure we get all of that data. At this stage, I'd like to invite Minister Cummins to speak to the issue, because I referred to the fact that we're an island, we're cut off from the world, and therefore the state of the airport, and with respect also to its functioning, and for those who are hoping to get in or out, if you can address that for us, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Barbados. I'd like to start by expressing the appreciation of the government, and in particular the Ministry of Tourism and International Transport, to the team at the Grantley Adams International Airport. As Prime Minister said earlier, these are team members that stand up before the event and remain in place throughout the passage of the event and then afterwards, and they have been continuously in place since 8 o'clock the evening before the storm passed Barbados, and they remain on duty now at the Grantley Adams International Airport. The airport withstood the hurricane well. We did not have any infrastructural damage except at an ancillary facility, which is the Civil Aviation Training Center. But we subsequently did experience water damage coming in through one of the areas, which resulted in an electrical fire in the airport facility. That therefore took power down at the airport, which has compromised the ability of the Grantley Adams International Airport to reopen once the all clear was given. In addition, I know many people see the physical facility of the airport, but the airport actually has secondary locations all across the country in 9 specific locations, which provide satellite services for air traffic control. As we've dealt with island-wide power challenges, in many locations, the power has been out at those locations, which have made it challenging for our satellite systems and our air traffic control to safely guide aircraft back into Barbados and also for the purposes of departure. We're pleased to report that we've been working closely with the Grantley Adams International Airport team, with the Barbados Light and Power, and with private service providers to ensure that we're able to respond to the damage caused by the fire at Grantley Adams International. It was quickly contained, but there is some smoke damage which is remaining. And of course, as I said, it's an electrical fire, so they are working on identifying parts. I'm sure you would understand that, as PM said, there's not a duplicate of the Grantley Adams International Airport, so if a part has gone down, there is nothing like it on island, and so we either have to source the equipment or we have to borrow and make do or make any arrangements. And so we've been working with the Barbados Light and Power. 3 of the 9 sites are now back up. So we have Gun Hill back up, South Point is back up, and 1 other came back up within the last 30 minutes. And so we're expecting that over the course of the next few hours that we will have the majority of the critical sites back online to allow for satellite navigation. The airport, therefore, on the basis of that trajectory, is expected to reopen tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. And overnight, there will be a closure of the system. All systems will be taken offline at 8 p.m. tonight to do a full run-through of the system and to ensure everything is running smoothly. And it is at that time that we will be in a position to power the airport back up in its entirety. Unfortunately, I should specify that the fire that took the breaker, the server panel down, did affect the area of one of the functional capacities of the airport, and so that is going to be powered down to ensure that it is safely brought back online. And I would want to take the opportunity to say to visitors and travelers, persons who are inbound to Barbados and those who are traveling outbound, we expect that once the airport reopens tomorrow, we will resume full service at the Grantley Adams International Airport. The Chief Medical Officer has already advised that for those persons who were meant to travel into Barbados and who would have taken their tests, that there are arrangements being put in place to facilitate and to remind that all testing still will take place on arrival at Grantley Adams International Airport to ensure that we are still in compliance with all public health protocols for travel purposes. And so I want to thank you for your patience. I want to thank you for your understanding, and we of course take the opportunity to apologize to all of our visitors on island who have been inconvenienced by the storm. But we want to thank you for weathering it out with us, and we ask you to make contact with us at any point that you find yourself in need of any assistance. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lisa. So that we begin to see that this is very much a multifaceted thing. What I haven't addressed here, and perhaps we should, but we literally are waiting, the reports on the government buildings. The only one that we definitely know for sure so far, the Civil Aviation Training Center lost its roof, and the acting head of the public service, Mr. Cummins, is here. I don't know if he wants to just address that and the fact that we're waiting for more data, but also address what is expected of public servants on Monday. Mr. Cummins, thank you.
Good evening, Prime Minister, members of Cabinet, colleagues, members of the media. As Prime Minister said, we are still continuing the damage assessment on the government buildings, but so far the greatest damage has been the Civil Aviation building that has lost its roof, and we have some damage to 3 schools that we're aware of: Parkinson Secondary, Coach Parry, and the St. Lawrence Primary School. But this information is still coming in. I want to extend thanks to my fellow permanent secretaries for submitting the information and keeping me posted, and also for the chief property manager of the Ministry of Housing and his team. They've been sending information in on a regular basis. But the important thing is that come Monday, the public service will be operational at the usual time, 8:15. We'll be there and ready to serve the public. But as you would have heard from Minister Gadenegel at the Ministry of Transport Works and Water Resources, we've been mobilized since just before the all clear yesterday, because we were clearing the roadways. We work all day today, we will work all day tomorrow. And I want to just implore motorists, as the Chief Technical Officer just said, please slow down as you see our workers on the road. We don't necessarily have enough cones, but please slow down and respect the fact that they're keeping Barbados clean. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. And while once again we are hoping that we'll be able to deliver public services from Monday morning, there may be a few departments that may be affected because of internal damage that we are not yet aware of. And in fairness, I think Mr. Cummins has pointed out that people have started today, but we're equally conscious that in many instances, some of the people who may need to be relied upon are also themselves victims of Hurricane Elsa. Okay? So once again, I appeal to the public for their patience and consideration there. At this point, the next major issue, logically speaking, you've heard me speak about the number of people without houses or whose roofs have been damaged and the volume. I think that we have so far a number that has been indicated to us of people who need accommodation. A lot of people are staying with friends and families, but we have an obligation to make sure that our citizens are not further affected beyond what has only to be described as a traumatic and stressful event. And therefore, the Ministry of People Empowerment will speak, Minister Ford will speak to the fact of some of the things that have to be put in place while Minister Duguid, UDC, RDC, NHC do their work. People still living and still have to function. Minister Ford.
Thank you very much, Honourable Prime Minister, colleagues, members of the civil service, members of the private sector, media personnel, fellow Barbadians. Blessed good evening to all of you. I first want to add my sentiments to the Honourable Prime Minister and others who would have for the last few days been extending and empathizing sympathy in respect of those persons who would have lost their homes. It is not an easy exercise, and many households that are new leaked on this weekend. So you can imagine those persons who are vulnerable, who cannot repair their houses or did not have the necessary resources to be able to keep their roofs on. I also want to thank the Disaster Emergency Department, especially the DEOs who have been on the street all yesterday, all today, helping to clear the streets with some of those persons working in the Ministry of Public Works and NCC. They too have been critical in clearing the paths for those persons, especially the social workers who have been doing the assessments, to be able to reach the communities and the villages to bring in information that we will have proper records as to where we are at with those who are in some way dislocated. The roving teams, volunteers, government officials, they have all been on track and helping us to be able to chart the course going forward. Now, the numbers have been large. There are over 1,100 persons who are in some way impacted upon when it comes to house stops, damage to households, some form of dislocation. And therefore, the Ministry of People Empowerment will continue to meet the attendant needs of persons through shelter, clothing, furniture and appliances, and so on. That is extremely critical at this time, especially when we know that we are going to be expecting more of the showers. We are looking at alternative accommodation for many, because there are few landlords who are available to help us out in this respect. And of course, if we're going to get landlords, we will wish landlords who will have housing that will be appropriate to meet the needs of families. Some of them are as large as 12 persons in households who have been dislocated at this time. And therefore, we are merging and seeking the support of the private sector, persons who have houses that will want to rent them to the government for us to foot the bills, because those persons who have been disenfranchised at this time as a result of the bad weather are mostly the very poor people in the communities across Barbados. And so it is our duty as a caring government to ensure that we look after their needs. And then we have also sought to get a couple of apartments as well to be able to facilitate those persons who have those needs. Some of them will still be able to want to cook their own food. And those apartments, as far as we have learned, will have the necessary cooking facilities to be able to have those persons properly facilitated. Our social workers have been out in the field ensuring that they collect the information, making the assessments, sending in the reports, and you will appreciate families themselves have been calling in other persons on the ground. And I must tell you, the politicians were out there not looking for votes, but looking to empathize and share, because this is really the time that Barbadians need the support of everyone to be able to keep some kind of roof on their heads and food on their table, and of course a bed to sleep in. There has been a lot of damage. Many beds I saw all today while I was on the street. Since 8 this morning, I saw many persons whose beds are out in the rain. The house tops were lost, so the beds are waterlogged, and therefore they cannot use them. The government of Barbados, through the People Empowerment Ministry, will help to ensure that those persons can get comfort once they get the shelter that is necessary. I am not going to go into the section Dr. Duguid would have spoken about, where the Ministry of Housing and Lands, as well as the Urban and Rural Department, they will carry out their duties. But I look forward to continuing to work to ensure, with all my colleagues, with all the private and public sector, that individuals, households will get some form of help. Some of them have chosen not to want to go anywhere. There are families that have been kind enough and accommodating to want to have them with them. There are others who are staying as a temporary measure with friends, but you will appreciate that if a whole house top has been gone, or houses have collapsed altogether, friends can't keep them for 3 months or 2 months or whatever the time frame is. And therefore, it is our duty as a caring government, as I said earlier, to look after the needs of those who are disadvantaged, those who are most vulnerable, and that also includes our senior citizens and those who are disabled. And therefore, Madam Prime Minister, colleagues all, ladies and gentlemen, I implore you that we will do our best to make sure that that quality care is given. And I encourage you as well to lend your support to them in whatever areas they may be, because when today is their day, we don't know when tomorrow will be ours. Even though we may have the strongest looking houses or whatever kind of health that is required, we do not know. And therefore, I encourage you, let us work together to make the difference, because we are a caring society and we must do it at all levels despite whatever the circumstances. Thank you, Madam Prime Minister.
Thank you, Cynthia. May I just add that when we realized what was happening yesterday evening, we asked Minister Cummings also to start to do a check with the tourism sector. We are aware that many of our hotels are empty, and apartment hotels in particular, because of the COVID pandemic, and therefore we are happy that she's been able to start that process, and I hope we will continue. At the moment, the numbers of persons needing accommodation, not all, but so far are 289, and we expect that number to rise. There are about 500 who are saying that in the initial short stages they can find something. We don't know how many of them will be able to stay where they're staying for 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 8 weeks, 10 weeks, depending on whether it's a house repair or a house construction. But what we do know is that we are prepared to deal with persons, because everybody in Barbados must have a shelter that wants shelter. And what we can't do is have people sleeping in the elements, because that's not who we are, and that's not how we do things. And first and foremost, the preservation of life is what matters. To that extent, I think Minister Cummings had indicated that we have, there are 30 apartments and 40 rooms in hotels that have already been identified, plus then the Barbados Workers Union Labour College has also indicated, I think they have 20 rooms, and then the Spiritual Baptist Church has quite kindly come forward and indicated also they have 16 furnished apartments, I believe. And that's why Minister Ford is asking anyone who has, clearly this is not open season, we do not profit at people suffering, but people will get paid decently for their units, but we will not be encouraging any profiteering on the backs of people suffering. And in fact, since we are paying the bill in some instances, we will not be encouraging that. Okay? But we do recognize that there's a unique opportunity where, absent of many visitors, there's a possibility that those persons who have apartment hotels or who have rooms that are available that are not committed to the tourism sector, which is opening back now, may well be able to assist us in this respect. At this point, you would have to ask the question, well, if all of this going on, what's going to happen to my child? Sandhya? Thank you.
Thank you, Prime Minister. My heart really goes out to all those persons who have been affected by this particular system. I saw a child this afternoon who was so excited that not only did the representative for the area come to his household because the roof had blown off, but that he was able to give the Minister of Education a tour of his premises. And I mentioned that because sometimes in all of this we forget the children, and we forget how the children are impacted. And even though it was difficult for him, he was still excited that he could no doubt go back to school at some point and tell everyone that the Minister had been there at his residence. All that said, I think that we've recognized throughout this crisis again that our schools are particularly important and have to be pressed into action when we have natural disasters, and therefore they have a multi-purpose, and as such, that's why we've been pushing to ensure that our schools are not only fit for teaching and learning, but that they're also places where you have the opportunity to provide accommodation and shelter in the event of an emergency such as this. So of those persons who've been affected and in need of accommodation, obviously our children are also impacted because there may not be electricity, there may not be running water at their respective households, and we are mindful that the shelters as well at this point in time until we have the additional accommodation are obviously going to be utilized by the various individuals in order to seek shelter. At the moment, we have a number of public shelters that are open, Connelltown House of Prayer, St. Christopher's Primary, the Lodge School, Blackman and Gollop Primary School, Lester Vaughan, Gordon Walters, and many of them are being pressed into action as the need arises. There are a number of people who within the last 24 hours may not have come forward initially, but more are coming, especially as MPs are on the ground. The persons from disaster emergency have been assessing the damage, and the truth is I'm also finding that there are people who, because of the lack of electricity, have not been able to report fully to the disaster emergency and to representatives, what is happening. So I think that those numbers are possibly likely to increase as well. And we will make the accommodation and press into action those shelters as the need arises. The Barbados Defence Force would have provided meals to individuals in the shelters yesterday. The School Meals Department has been pressed into action from today and will continue to do so until there is no longer a need. We would have stood up the shelters today in order to provide the breakfast and also lunch for a number of those individuals. And of course, in all of this, the schools have not been spared in terms of the damage. You would have heard earlier some issues at Foundation School, Parkinson as well. But we've estimated at this point about 50% of the schools have no structural damage. However, there's minor damage that is presenting itself across various plants. We've got windows that are missing as a result of the heavy wind. We've got water intrusion in some of the classrooms. There's been damage to the guttering and to the pipes. There's also been missing light fittings and fixtures, and of course some minor roof issues. There is a lot of water damage in some areas. At one of the schools, Bay Primary, we have some damage to the water tank. At Erdiston Special School, the ceiling fell in one area, and there's structural columns that have been impacted and damage to the water tank there. Gordon Walters, we have windows that are completely out at this point. And Luther Thorne, there's been the roof off from a section of the school, and also at St. Catherine's as well. In addition to the damage, physical damage to the schools, we also have the impact of the fallen trees and in some cases the power lines as well. So we've got about 9 schools where we have large trees that have fallen, probably because of their age, but because of their size as well. They have impacted, obviously, the ability to get onto the premises or to traverse the premises. And so those are being removed with the cooperation of MTW as well as private contractors wherever possible in order to be able to remove those as quickly as possible. While all this is ongoing, we've had the generators refilled by both of the companies, Rubis and Sol, just to ensure that we continue to prepare for any future eventualities as well. And at our secondary schools, we have generally the reports of the large branches as well falling at most of the compounds, similar issues to what we have presenting at the primary schools. At Granley Allams, we had some downed electricity and telephone wires, which are being attended to. There was major damage at the Corrigan Parish School. Several roofs are off. There's been water intrusion, fallen trees, and debris across the school plant. Windows have been blown out from the prefab classrooms. Some exposed soft stone, and a number of ceiling tiles also have been removed by the weather. St. Leonard's School has some damage from fallen trees, mainly around the main student blocks and the main car park and on the eastern fence of the school. The industrial arts block has been affected, and computers and monitors at the school have also been impacted and damaged by the rain. So for those who may wish to help us to replace those, I will make the plea here for the necessary assistance. And the truth is, reports continue to come in. Many of our principals have been impacted as well, because obviously they would normally be in the shelters, but the truth is they've been impacted by the electricity. So in terms of reports coming in, we're still continuing to get those reports, and we're responding to those reports as they come in. In light of the fact that, as you've heard this afternoon, obviously restoration efforts have started, but the truth is that they are likely to continue for the next 3 or so days, 3 to 5 days, in order to get things fully up and functioning. We therefore are of the view that given the impact on some of the students and certainly on their families, the dislocation that may be caused as a result of persons moving, whether from the shelters into accommodation, private accommodation, that we're not an unreasonable government, and therefore, while we believe that students have to be online or be in a face-to-face environment in order to learn, we want to obviously give sufficient time to the relevant authorities to be able to handle their business and to get things in order over the next couple of days. So Monday and Tuesday of next week, it is our intention to suspend classes across the schools. All students, however, will go online from on Wednesday and Thursday. As you know, school is ending next week. It is the last week of term, but we believe that even if the students are not able to interface fully in this environment. There are some who can, and those who can will go online. Some teachers as well may be affected, but those who can should still not be deprived of the opportunity to at least wrap up the term. And also, we believe that the Class 4 students at the primary level, we will again make accommodation for them to do face-to-face once everything is cleaned up, and they can return, hopefully, once everything is done on Wednesday and Thursday. We also have some students who are sitting the examinations for CAPE and CXC, and next week exams would have been continuing as scheduled. I think there's Maths and English next week, Tuesday, Wednesday, and possibly on Monday we have a few examinations as well. But we are in discussions with CXC because we recognize obviously that this is an unprecedented event. Many of the students may have been impacted because of the issues with electricity or inability to get to the various centers, and as a consequence, we are speaking to them in relation to what may happen next week. So I will be in a position, hopefully by tomorrow, to be able to further update, but we are trying to work out at this point, how do we deal with those who may be affected? And so long as the school halls, which at this point, most of them are in the condition that they can take students, exams can go ahead. But for those who are experiencing hardship, they have the opportunity, obviously, to indicate to us the challenges, and we will certainly be there to ensure that they are not prejudiced in any way. So, Prime Minister, that is the update at this point. If there are any changes due to any difficulties that any of the other agencies may have, we will certainly update the country as to any changes that may have to be made to those arrangements. But that is the position at this point in time. Thank you, PM.
Thank you very much, Santia. Before I wrap up, we have a number of officials here, and I just want to make sure, is there anybody who needs to say anything before we finish based on anything that we've forgotten? I think we have everything. There are 2 points that I'd like to add. The Ministry of People Empowerment will also be arranging counseling where necessary, and I'll ask them to deal with the traditional counselors as well as the churches or religious organizations. This is a disruptive event, and I can't tell you the anxiety and concern that I felt in listening to a number of people as they explained what they went through. In one instance in St. Philip, one woman actually described to Minister Abrams and myself how she stood on a chair and literally held down with others, holding the roof down as it kept flapping, and with a hammer and material. And as the roof lifted, it lifted her up and down, back down. There were others who literally, there was another lady who left her wall house and her comfort and went and took an elderly gentleman and another person across in the rain and wind to their house. There was another incident yesterday in where was it? In Ferry Valley, same thing again. In almost every area, we're hearing stories of the kind of horror that people faced. Some people went into the bathroom in order to be able to withstand the remaining event. What I can say is that we give thanks today for the fact that Elsa moved was a woman in a hurry. Elsa moved at 28 miles per hour. Can you imagine if Elsa was a woman walking at 5 miles per hour? Then it meant that the incident or the drama would have lasted 5 times the length of time. And therefore the devastation on the island would have been horrific. In the case of Bahamas with Dorian, it just sat over the island for 2 days. So you begin to understand. We are blessed and lucky that the fact that Elsa moved at 28 miles per hour, and the most we really had to deal with was less than 2 hours of aggressive winds and rain. And to that extent, I want Barbadians to appreciate that this was a serious hurricane, that the damage is significant. If there's one thing we have to be thankful for, as I said, is that it moved quickly. But at the same time, I want us to take these things seriously. And you may think that I'm a stuck record, and I'm not stuck record as a Prime Minister now. I've been doing this since 2001. When I was Minister of Home Affairs, Wilfred, and Attorney General. And there were instances when we got, as Bajans with their blister blind, because while the Met Office warned us, Sharon, you would know that something was coming. Roy, you were on the other side then. It didn't come, and we were blister blinded for the fact that the hurricane didn't come. The bottom line is that every time it doesn't come, you now know that you have to say thank you, hallelujah, because it does not play. I also want to remind us that separate from the counseling, we are aware, and I'm sorry that the Sanitation Services Authority isn't here this afternoon to speak directly to you, but we will be asking them to ensure that the landfill is open tomorrow, and we will be asking them also to ensure that they put specific arrangements in place for cleanup, because the one thing that Barbados needs now, there's too much galvanized on the ground, there's too much old wood on the ground, there's too much debris and materials.
Landfill 7 to 3, open 7 to 3.
Yeah, but that's my whole point. 7 to 3 is still not sufficient, and we need to find out why they can't open 7 to 7, because the reality is that this is not normal circumstances. I don't want to address it now. Leave us the time to settle it, and a PSA will come out later this evening or tomorrow on the opening of the hours of the landfill. And secondly, that the SSA will need to make and put arrangements in place so that over the course of the next 2 weeks, we literally try to remove as much of the debris and the garbage from houses and from communities as possible, because we do not want them becoming unintentional missiles affecting people. And you don't need a hurricane for a piece of debris to fly, and you certainly don't need anyone at all for you to step on a rusty nail. And if you're diabetic, I don't need to tell you what will happen. So believe you me, I'm asking for this to do. The construction and the demolition sites for the waste are usually outside of the landfill, isn't it, Bagatelle? Okay. The head of the public service is advising me that besides Bagatelle, that we will advise you through a PSA what will be the other sites that will be made available for the construction and demolition debris, so that that may be brought. And as I said, with respect to some instances, we know that certainly those who can afford to carry and who want to get their places around them clean, please proceed. Those who can't, we will then, if you put your information into the DEM, then DEM can transfer it to SSA to see how we may assist you where possible. I'd like to also address the issue of charitable donations. We already have people, especially our family and friends from overseas, asking what they can do and how they can do it. And the Director of Finance is present. We will be asking him to ensure that there's an account opened Monday morning that will allow those who want to make financial donations so to be able to do so. And that, once that is open with the bank, that information will be shared with the media and on social media for that. But there are also people, as we know, who don't necessarily want to do financial donations, but want to do donations in kind. The government will work with civil society and will designate a few entities to receive on our behalf. And Minister Colin Jordan, who is responsible for the third sector, will address that hopefully on Monday and let you know who are those designated entities that we will ask to help us with and why. Because when we have a better fix, people lost their clothes, people lost everything, people need things from scratch. And we don't want it to be just a case of aimless donations. So we want the 48 hours too to be able to give them an idea of the kinds of things that we believe that people will need, and then to have some kind of site done up that will allow people to say, I am intending to donate this, so that people will begin to almost feel frightened to say, so I never get married yet, but almost like a wedding registry. You understand? Or a baby shower registry, where people can say, look, this is what, because we want to minimize the damage and the wastage as much as possible. And we are aware that many of those who are making the sacrifice to send, they themselves are also in difficulties because of the pandemic. Sorry? Yeah. Minister Duguid has also reminded me that we will be setting up a register too for artisans and laborers, because we recognize that this is a learning opportunity, particularly for laborers. Mr. Trotman is also here from the Ministry of Public Works with the Building Standards Authority, and he is responsible. He already has some good videos, but we're going to break them down even further so that those artisans who are working on their own can know how do we recommend that you put up a roof and tie it down properly. How do we recommend that we do foundations and do them properly? And to do these in 3 and 4 minute videos that are styled appropriately, both for the artisan or contractor and the homeowner, so that people will know. Because one of the things that bothered me deeply today too, and I am not an engineer and I don't know much about construction, but I know that some of the pieces of wood that I see attached to galvanized and what do you call those things that they sell? Not galvanized. No, it's on my roof too. I forget. I draw a blank. No, not permaclad. That I see attached to the permaclad could not be any bigger than 1 inch thick and 2 inches wide. And I know that that can't hold down anything, not even my hand. You understand? So that the bottom line is that we need to make sure, not just for the established large contractors, but for all artisans in Barbados, that they know, and we're going to put it out there, free public education, this is how we want you to build. Mercifully, as I said, Mr. Trotman has a few videos. They're long, so we're going to put them in bite-sized chunks so that people can relate to them easier rather than watching a full 15 or a half-hour video. The register for persons who want to learn, if you're a laborer and you want to learn, you want to become a steel bender, you want to become a mason, a carpenter, all of those things, the Ministry of Housing will manage that register for us. And we hope that with Santia's ministry and the training board, that we use this exercise of building these houses. And this has nothing to do with government's main housing program. That's going on and will continue. But this recovery effort, that we use this also as a training moment as we go forward with this. So you will get the details on the account from the Director of Finance on Monday. You will get the details on the in-kind donations from Minister Colin Jordan and the designated entities that we will be using to help us coordinate that distribution. And we will also have the register between the Ministry of Education and Technological Training and the Ministry of Housing, hopefully make sure that we turn this into a silver lining, because with every cloud comes what? A silver lining. And the matter as it relates to financing, I think you see the Director of Finance here, you see the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Finance, you see Dr. Greenidge, and you see Minister Strawn. Rest assured, we understand that it takes cash to care, and rest assured that the government will exercise all due diligence. But there are some things that we have to follow up on. We do pay CRIF, the Caribbean Catastrophe Risk Insurance Facility. When we had Tomas, we got, I think, a payment of $5.8 million US. When we had Tropical Storm Kirk, we got a payment too, I can't remember how much, but it was in that rough vicinity too. I think it was 5.5 US at the time, about 11 million Barbados. And we anticipate, and that's why we ask people to call into the DEM or let us know so that we can ensure that all damage is appropriately recorded in one central location, whether it is housing, infrastructural, or otherwise, so that we can manage our finances appropriately and make sure that we can appropriately account for all that we're doing. The point that I'll make as we end, I said it yesterday, but I'm not sure how many people heard me, and I want to contextualize it again. This country has been tested in the last 18 months in ways that have been untraditional. We have had the worst pandemic that the world has seen in 102 years. We've had the worst ashfall that this country has seen in 119 years. And we've had the first and worst hurricane in 66 years. We are doing all of this against a decade of implosion economically, which led to our having to undergo debt restructuring and enter an IMF program. It is the challenge of a generation. It is the challenge that this nation must embrace if we are to build forward for our children and grandchildren a better and stronger nation than that which we inherited. I have every confidence that we are up to that challenge. And the truth is that with each one, I see a side of Barbadians, and I see an empathy, and I see a desire to fight, and I see a resilience, and I see a consideration that some may argue even that this has brought out the best in who we are, and in a very real sense, if we do nothing else as we leave this moment in time to hopefully better times, we remember and recall that this is why we need to stay grounded and to value the things that we value most and not those that we became distracted with globally and nationally with respect to how life is to be lived. That is why we hear people talk about building forward better. That is why we talk about building in green, a green recovery. That is why we talk about protecting the blue economy and our reefs and things that have gone. All of these things are the things that we are going to be fighting for. But above all else, the empathy and the care that we are our brothers and our sisters' keeper. And that, as Cynthia said earlier, today for me and tomorrow for you. And as we heard, as we talked to a lot of the people who got help, in every instance, what did the neighbors tell us? Man, we couldn't left him because he was there for us, so and so. Or the man who tiled the lady's house and told her, don't worry, when you can pay me, if it takes 2 years, 4 years, you pay me. She rescued him thereafter. In every instance, it is the quality of relationships within families and the quality of relationships within communities and the quality of relationships among friends that has made the absolute difference with how people walk away from each of these three disasters: the pandemic, the ashfall, and now Hurricane Elsa. And I ask this country to remember we will never have 100% consensus. But let us focus and fix the things that we can fix. And let us recognize, and for those who feel that this is a silly season, I say don't turn a brush. Don't turn a brush. Because if you feel that this is a silly season, and that I have that luxury to be distracted by a silly season, when Bajans don't have houses, or when Bajans are fighting COVID, or when Bajans are fighting to clean up ash, then I say you are welcome to the delusions in your head, and I have nothing more to say. But for the rest of Barbados who are ready to work and ready to put this country back on a track that allows us to continue to stand tall, because we stand tall in terms of what we want and our comments and our values, etc. But we've been hit, and the best way to deal with a hit is to dust yourself off and get back up and continue the march and the battle. And I have every confidence that this is who we are and this is what we shall do. I'm going to pause and ask for questions. We've been here long, but by the same token, much has happened in the last 36 hours that requires our attention. Colville?
Yes, Madam Prime Minister. Just three brief questions from me.
You know, one blow is kill old cow. I'm not sure if that's so in St. Vincent, but it's so in Barbados. So one at a time, Skipper.
Okay, Madam Prime Minister. Firstly, I know that you're still in the assessment phase of things. Do you have an idea as to the damage in the cost sense? Is it in the tens of millions or hundreds of millions?
Caldwell, if I gave you an answer, it would be to help you sell papers. And since I'm not here to help you sell papers, I'm going to reserve that answer until the appropriate people, I pointed out the Director of Finance, the Permanent Secretary of Finance, Dr. Greenidge, Minister Strawn, and all of the line ministries will feed in their assessments. I give you the assurance that, and even in the database that we did yesterday, we put in a specific column to deal with the costs. We are now in a position, for example, I think there's a supplementary coming for the ash, and it's not even the complete thing, but we know that that is more or less in the vicinity of $20 million, but it doesn't contain everything. Now, if I tried to tell you that figure in April, I would have been pulling it from a hat. And I've tried to make sure that this government operates on the basis of walking not just by faith, but also by sight, because sight is what will determine realistically what we spend. But it is significant. I would not call it devastating, because I've seen other devastation in other hurricanes, and this is not going to be the girl who cried wolf. But having said that, this is the most significant damage that I have seen in this country in the 30 years that I have been involved in public life.
Okay, and final questions from me. Walking around with you today, we would have heard a recurring theme from homeowners: no insurance, no insurance. Firstly, how concerning is that to you? And secondly, with regards to building codes, do we have mandatory building codes, and are you concerned about the adherence to those building codes?
I thought you heard me earlier. I made the point
I guess
earlier.
for repetition purposes.
Thanks.
You're right.
I made the point earlier that there's no statutory basis for it, and that will come. And the reason for this thing has been going around for almost 15 years, and there will be a determination. And I've asked the Minister to help us have that determination, not today, but I asked him before, to have that determination by the end of this year with respect to the legislative framework. Why? Because there are those who believe that to have another layer in the process will only delay everything considerably. But as a lawyer, I've learned to deconstruct and reconstruct. And therefore, one of the things that we started discussing just before COVID came, in fact, it was on the other side of this building when we had the special colloquium in November or December of 2019, literally just before COVID, on the issue of resilient construction. And we recognize that we will have to have a way of shifting the burden and allowing those who are responsible for professional standards themselves and who at common law have a duty to care, a duty of care to those whom they're advising or providing the construction services for. And to that extent, therefore, we feel that government's role should be to have the inspectorate, to set the standards, to train, and to have the inspectorate to monitor. And that is why, even though we do not have the legislative framework in place yet, we believe that the work that Mr. Trotman's crew is doing at MTW can help considerably in the public education process. And I believe, separate from the videos, he indicated to us just now that there are some straps and different things that you have and models that they have that they will put in a place almost like an exhibition center that artisans can go and look at it and discuss. And I go back to the Hurricane Janet example. I wasn't born, but all who were tell the story that the biggest shortage in Barbados became carpenters, and that we developed a new creature called a storm carpenter who could not understand the physics of the trusses or could not literally build the kinds of roofs that would withstand. This morning, I went in my constituency to check some things, and there were 5 or 6 houses. Ian, you were with me. They are old houses, and by all means, they need work. They're rent houses, and the landlord clearly needs to fix them, but I think it may be a case where the landlord has passed and nobody going forward to fix. All of those houses had gable roofs. Do I need to tell you that not one of them, not one, as poor condition as they were in, not one of those roofs lifted off. And I want us, therefore, to apply our hearts to wisdom and to recognize that the quality and the design of the roof and the quality and design of the foundation matter. And we need to be able to have not just the artisans, but even the people who are paying artisans to know the difference between what is good and what is bad. All of us know food that is good and no food that is bad. All of us know when food smells and it's off and you ain't going to use it. Well, everybody in Barbados must learn to know what is good construction for roofs and for foundations. If not, they're going to find themselves being duped in some instances, and we're not duped, being unfortunate victims of things that they ought not to be a victim of. With respect to the insurance, I think you will recall that a previous Barbados Labour Party government, of which many of us were members, would have established a catastrophe fund, which is funded by donations through the National Insurance Scheme. We are proposing to make a further amendment to it because what we recognized was that the legislation speaks to actual damage, but we are fighting battles globally about vulnerability as opposed to actual damage. And we're fighting these battles because we say that no matter how far you think we've gone, we are vulnerable to Elsa. Dorian came and passed, but we would have been vulnerable to her too. We're vulnerable to floods. We're vulnerable to other things, ashfall. We're vulnerable to economic catastrophe. What we therefore have determined, and last year we amended the Catastrophe Fund Act to deal with economic catastrophe, correct? We are going to amend it to deal with vulnerability as well, and to begin to use and see how we can have a more comprehensive approach to self-insurance within the context of that catastrophe fund. And why? One of the consequences of the climate crisis is that there's increased weather patterns, increased weather systems. And as a result, it means that there have been increased claims. And increased claims invariably means that reinsurers start to do what? To up their premium. And that is why in this same building, you know, life is funny. In the same November of 2019, this government had an international insurance colloquium, if you will recall, where we brought in people from overseas and also people here. And we did it again last year. I did a few things last year because we are fighting an international battle. The cost of reinsurance and the cost of insurance in this region in the Caribbean is becoming difficult. And what bothers me is especially for householders who want to become homeowners, they have to be able to afford the insurance because if not, the bank is not lending you any money. Correct? And for those small businesses and large businesses who want to continue operating, you have to be able to afford the cost of insurance. But if the price of insurance shoots up, and we've been lucky compared to the Bahamas and compared to others in the Northern Caribbean, as much as you think as our rates here are high, those outside and up north are far higher. But what we need to do is to recognize that if we don't resolve this problem, not just in the Caribbean, but for all small island developing states that are facing the climate crisis, the cost of doing business and the ability to do business will become either prohibitive or impossible. And why? No bank is going to lend a hotel any money unless it is insured. But if the cost of insurance is prohibitive, then it makes it difficult for that hotelier to be able to afford it. And you can apply that same example to almost any other form of business that requires buildings to operate, and where the absence of the buildings can literally preclude or prevent the conduct of commerce by that particular company. Are you understanding what I'm saying? So this is an issue. It's a very unsexy issue, but it is a very critical issue. And I thank you for asking the question, because it is something that I hope that the media will start to focus on at the same time as the Ministry of Finance, Minister Strawn, Director of Finance, and others get to the question of how best can we further expand the base of the catastrophe fund to provide that kind of self-insurance. And it's not just for climatic events too. There's something called house fires. And Barbadians, as you know, I would say that on average, probably 2/3 of the house fires in this country are houses that are uninsured. And that has been my experience in public life for over 30 years. So this is a real issue, and thank you. Ian?
Good evening, Madam Prime Minister. I'm not sure who exactly would be answering this question, although it does kind of refer to what you said initially last year. Based on what we've just experienced with Elsa, I'm wondering if there needs to be a reissuing, or whatever you want to call it, of utilities showing compassion with regards to disconnection, especially given the circumstances that so many are under right now.
I would imagine some compassion, Ian, but it takes cash to care too. So it's going to be a balance. So I don't want to be that person telling people that you can ignore paying your bills. By the same token, if you have hardship, I know that all of the entities, in the case of the Water Authority, they had a water relief board. Some cases are legitimate, some are not. And I would imagine, Mr. Blackman, that you all have the same with Light and Power, although they tell me that when people got bills to pay, they pay the light bill first, they pay the telephone bill second, and sometimes first, and then the water bill last.
That's what I do, actually. I pay the light bill, then the phone bill first.
But I would like in that order. I would like you to remember that water is the staff of life. So if I were you, I would pay water. Thank you.
My next question, based on also this whole thing, would refer to the Minister of Education. Does the current circumstances affect the 11+ in any form or fashion?
Thanks, Ian. I think I kind of addressed it. We've said that before we would make priority for the students who are sitting examinations. That hasn't changed. I think the 11+ students are all geared up. Obviously, some of them may have been affected, but that hasn't come to the fore as yet. But we are seeking for the rest of this next week, to be able to allow them to at least return face-to-face and then continue to prepare once the school's plants are in a condition that they can continue.
Yes, ma'am.
Lee Dong, but as you can tell, given the situation in St. Vincent, when there was a crisis and persons were in the shelters, there were outbreaks. Do you have concerns regarding outbreaks in the shelter, and have you given any further thought to rapid testing within the shelters?
Let us put things in context once again for you. I think there are only 20 people in shelters now. And we accept that it's going to be difficult to keep people in shelters because of the public health crisis. That is why we're going as far as possible to dealing with alternative accommodation where people can protect their space, for want of a better phrase. And because of the example of what happened in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. So this is a case of us not wanting to be penny wise and pound foolish. And it may well therefore be better to put persons, particularly since some people may be there for weeks, rather than believing that you can have people living out of a school hall at the very time that we have accommodation available in different forms in the country. Okay? Let me also say on the COVID matter, look at who is here. With the exception of Santi and myself, this, and to a lesser extent, Lisa, the rest of the ministers here do not sit on the COVID-19 committee, subcommittee, cabinet subcommittee, and I've deliberately kept them out of this Because drunk or sober, what do we have in the world? A pandemic. Drunk or sober, they have to get on with the business of making sure that Barbados does not drop the ball with respect to the pandemic. And that is why I continue to have the utmost confidence in Minister Walcott, Ministers Bostic, the AG, and all of the others, Minister McConney. And as I said, Santia, Lisa, and Santia and Lisa serve on that, and then they report to me as necessary. I am taking direct responsibility for the recovery effort. I anticipate in my head, and I'm sharing this with you, I've given myself a marker of 6 months to be able to resolve all of these issues, or as many of them as possible. And I have no difficulty in saying I fell short or I have succeeded. So the import of that is that we will keep accounting to you for what we are doing. But realistically, it is going to take about 6 months to deal with the consequences of Hurricane Elsa in Barbados. Okay? Any others? I think everybody knows now that it's time to get off the road and go back home and fix up. I'm sure the media got areas around you to clean up and fix up. And I know the public servants and the ministers do as well. And I really want to thank everybody for responding to the call of duty, because I am aware that almost everybody in this room has received some level of damage and some level of discomfort. And it has not gone unnoticed that you have left your own personal affairs and come to deal with the public space and the public good. And for that, on behalf of the government of Barbados, I say thank you to each of you, because it has not gone unnoticed. And as I close, we may not achieve perfection, but let it never be said that we did not care or we did not try. And therefore, as we go forward, as I said, we give ourselves an outer limit of 6 months, but let us try as far as possible to minimize the extent to which people will be discomforted, and let us try as much as possible to recognize that we will be fair and we will account for what we do, but we must move with dispatch, because the elements are still with us, and whether we like it or not, today is the 3rd of July. It is not the 3rd of November. And it therefore means that even as we do all of this, we are going to be challenged going forward by other systems that may come during the course of the year. So let us work together as one people. Thank you very much. God bless us all. God bless Barbados. Thank you.
By my sister, and we Friday morning about 7 o'clock we start hearing the wind. It's something that I never experienced before. And when we see all the houses start blowing and coming down, flattening, then after about 9 o'clock I come home, and when I see the message, so I hear everything full of water.
Yeah, it wasn't that easy. This is really a bad experience for me, because all I could do was cry. You know, but then I see the other houses over here, the roofs going and thing, and good thing I had Elvis with me, and he helped me clean up and stuff like that and move around things. But the main thing, I have life.
The experience I experienced was real rough because I could hear the wind howling and booming. But I still didn't give up. I still stand put. The top started to come to pieces and things like that there. But I still remain calm.
It actually like started, you could hear it cracking because the
rate.
Yeah, like actually hear it cracking from on top of there. You know, you hear it slowly cracking.